This is a Media Lab podcast. Dave, you look exhausted right now, but can you help me find something that I have misplaced?
Yeah, something small, like I don't know, it's hard to look for things in this mess.
Well, I mean, in relation to what it came off of, sure. I've somehow misplaced the machine's head. It has to be in this house somewhere.
How is that possible? The thing is fucking huge. Where have you been looking?
Basically just around this microphone setup so that I could record my thoughts at the same time. So not super far.
Have you looked at that weird dead tree that's in the back of your room? There's a giant, is it bleeding?
Well, I mean, you know, these Christmas gifts that you get all the time that you just put into like your dark corner and never look at again. You know how it goes. Yeah. Maybe it is there. Let me just reach my hand in.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
Well, here it is.
In his own garage, Kyle has built a machine, cobbled together with parts found in his friend's church basement and a dumpster behind the local Dairy Queen. This monstrosity is now alive and evil. Kyle has convinced his friend Dave to help stop the apocalypse by reviewing films the machine picks. The ultimate purpose is still unknown, and Kyle could have probably done this himself, but he's not being dragged to hell alone. This is Kyle and Dave versus the machine.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. My name is Kyle.
I'm Dave.
And I'm the machine.
This is a podcast where a sentient machine forces us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse. Although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. I will say that it seems hell-bent, and I use that word very specifically, hell-bent on us watching movies from the year 1999. And today we're going to be watching the movie Sleepy Hollow.
Ooh.
I am Constable Ichabod Crane, sent from New York to investigate murder in Sleepy Hollow.
How much have your superiors explained to you?
Only that the three were slain in open ground, their heads severed from their bodies.
Taken by the headless horseman, taken back to hell. He rode a giant black steed. To look at him made your blood run cold. Even today, the western woods is a haunted place where brave men will not venture.
We have murders in New York without benefit of ghouls and goblins.
Dave, I think that there's three things we have to figure out here at the very beginning. I want to know, first of all, your relationship with the Sleepy Hollow story.
Well, we dated in high school, and then we broke.
Never phoned me back, the bastard. Always would try to send me stuff in paraffin wax. I can't read that.
I do wish I had a seal. That'd be cool. I definitely have watched this movie and liked it. That's my memory of it. I haven't watched it in many years. Definitely remember the Disney animated version of it.
Yeah.
With the foolish-looking Ichabod Crane. And I feel like I want to say I read the book, but I couldn't tell you. If it's a poem, it's prose. I don't know. But it's old.
It is prose. If you want to, it is absolutely in the public domain. You can read it for free right now on any of your book reading software. I do have it downloaded, have not read it. I will be the first one to admit, but I do have it
exactly
on my iPhone. I could literally read it at any time, but have chosen not to. So I don't know what the original source material feels like. I, like you, have seen the Disney animated thing. It is part of a movie called Ichabod and Mr. Toad, where they shoved like those two stories, the Wind in the Willows and then the Ichabod Crane or the Sleepy Hollow story together.
Perfect fusion. I don't know why it wasn't written that way.
Weird fusion. And that's always how I kind of envision Ichabod Crane as being a very tall, lanky, huge Adam's apple type of figure. So having it being a very beautiful Johnny Depp is going to be probably a weird thing to kind of wrap my head around.
It's beautiful.
So I have not seen this movie here before, though. That being said, I have seen a lot of Tim Burton films. I want to know what your impression is, what your relationship with Tim Burton's filmography is.
Topically, I think he peaked around this era. And then he's really fallen off, and I don't watch Tim Burton films anymore. Starting for me with Batman, which is an incredible classic. And then I liked everything they did that was dark and twisted. And then I just started tipping off. And then the Alice in Wonderland crap is crap. And then I think he did something else. I don't care. I just don't care anymore. Yeah. So that's my relationship.
We'll probably get into more in this when we tell a bit of our backstory to this film. Yes, Alice in Wonderland was really where I started to fall off. It was one of the worst movies I've seen in theaters, in my opinion. I really dislike that movie.
Why don't you eat me?
But I will say that up until this point, like, I was super into Tim Burton. I mean, I still recently rewatched Edward Scissorhands. Loved it. I watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Liked that a whole lot too. I love A Nightmare Before Christmas. He did not actually do anything besides producing that movie, but still his influence, I feel, is like felt in that film. And Ed Wood happens to be one of my favorite films of all time. I would say it's probably in my top 100. Probably I like it that much. So there are elements of what he has done that I have been deeply passionate about. And yes, I would say that his last 5 or 6 movies have done kind of nothing for me, which is too bad. I maybe he'll find his way again. There have been other directors who have had like a weird like middle period and then kind of come back to prominence.
You know who didn't need that? Stanley Kubrick, apparently.
Yeah, he just decided to take 18 years off between films. Why not? Yeah. Why can't you do that, Tim Burton?
Yeah, and then just come back with a winner. Oh, we don't need this many losers.
Come back with a twisted tree with a weird mask, and then we're fine. We're good. Let's do this. Let me go and thank some of our sponsors, and then when we come back, we'll be spooky and white face paint talking about Sleepy Hollow. Hey there, everyone. Just Kyle breaking into the episode here once again to tell you about some of the lovely people who keep this show going. It is the middle of October. It's that spooky, scary time of the season. October surprises abound. And we are here to hopefully provide a little bit of entertainment for you in these spooky, spooky times. Because it's Halloween I'm talking about, and no other world events. Of course, I need to tell you that Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode of Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is brought to you by The Shared Mic. Listen, everyone has a story. The narratives of Edmontonians provide a rich patchwork of experiences that make our city a beautiful place to call home. A local podcast by age-friendly Edmonton, the Shared Mic Conversations for the Ages, is providing a platform for Edmontonians of different ages and backgrounds to share their stories. Listen to riveting intergenerational conversations on topics including cultivating friendships, building careers, exploring virtual theater, volunteerism, and more. The Shared Mic is out now. It launched back on October 5th and is available on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Shared Mic is brought to you by the Edmonton Seniors Coordinating Council and the City of Edmonton. This week, Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is also brought to you by the Alberta Podcast Network. So let's go and listen to one of our other great shows.
Hi, y'all. This is Ryan from the Eat More Barbecue podcast. I'm just a guy that loves slow-smoked southern barbecue. I love eating it, I love cooking it, and I really love talking about it. I want to help grow the barbecue culture here in Alberta, and this podcast is a great way for me to share the stories of the people involved in the barbecue community, like restaurant operators and competitive barbecue cooks. Along the way, I also visit with other folks like farmers, distilleries, breweries, and anything of interest to barbecue people. A new episode comes out every Wednesday wherever you listen to podcasts. Keep on smoking, folks.
Well, how was that for you, Dave?
Yeah.
In the most non-spoilery way, why don't you tell me what your thoughts were?
It was a Tim Burton film. We could just put a period on that.
Yeah.
You know, I got sucked into it. There's some twists and turns, and I thought it was kind of weird to get into at the beginning. It's been a while since I watched something so Tim Burton-y.
Sure, yeah.
So I forgot just how Tim Burton can be. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I never know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my argument would be is that this is such a weirdly styled movie where absolutely, yeah, the Tim Burton influence is there with like the twisted corners and definitely like the costuming and the makeup that is all like Tim Burton's aesthetic. I think he is stealing actually pretty heavily as far as like the blood and stuff goes, because that is not necessarily a very Tim Burton-y thing. Like the gushing of blood that we have in this movie, which is definitely meant to be horrific, I think, and also somewhat funny in a couple of different scenes. It very is reminiscent for me to the 1950s Hammer horror series. Hammer was a UK studio, and they basically remade all of the Universal horror films. So they did Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, etc., but like really amped up the gore because you could start to do that in the 1950s. And that's always what it was to me. It's like, oh, this blood is very fake. It's like super bright red. Like, this is not what blood actually looks like or behaves like.
Kyle is an expert of human blood and its viscosity. Yeah.
I've taught him well.
I just say, like, it's like super bright red. Like they amp up like the saturation on it, which is not what blood looks like when you actually bleed. At least that's what my victims tell me.
Wow.
So that's what it feels reminiscent of. And then it also is not just trying to be this horror film, which is using the Sleepy Hollow story very tangentially. Like, it kind of starts that way and then veers off into something completely different, which is, it feels like it's trying to be like a murder mystery, like a Agatha Christie, let's go and find out who the real killer is, and like piece it all together. Like, Ichabod Crane basically turns into Poirot for a bit, of him going around and trying to figure stuff out.
Like a nervous, anxious Poirot. Yeah, I don't know anything about the Hammer series, but I got a sense a little bit of Sam Raimi. I mean, Sam Raimi uses a lot of extreme camera work, but just the idea of using sort of cartoonish gore, and it's quite shocking at the beginning because you think you're going to cut away, and it's like, nah, I'm going to watch it beheading.
No, it doesn't, yeah.
Oh,
I agree with that. I was actually not expecting that from this movie. Sorry, now, again, having never seen it, I was like, okay, I know what this is going to look like. And then, oh, no, they're actually showing some of this stuff. Interesting.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you consider cinematography. It was interesting, in this period drama sense. Although I'll do a quick anecdote on another YouTube video I just watched, but how it's desaturated except for the blood. And you get, this may be why it doesn't remind you of your killings, because you're watching your victim's blood in full color. And this one is set against a near very desaturated black and white feel. Yeah,
well, that's what I was going to say. Like, that's the thing that I picked up on is like, this is basically the closest like black and white film I've watched. It is not in black and white, but it's super desaturated in the shadows and the midtones. And then when they do have some color, that they like ramp up just those color bits. Yeah. So it's really playing around with that kind of color theory. The cinematographer for this movie is Emmanuel Lubezki, who is a very famous cinematographer. I believe, has been nominated for a bunch. He holds the record for winning 3 Academy Awards in a row. Wow. Like, he won them 3 years in a row for cinematography, and no one else has ever done that before.
Name the movies, nerd. Yeah, let's go. What are they?
It was The Revenant, Birdman, and something else. I can't remember what the third one was.
Okay, I've actually heard of those.
But he's very well. And I watched this movie and it opened up like, this is beautiful. Like, everything is like pitch perfectly composed. Like, it looks really nice. Like, depth of field is so good. It's like, it almost didn't feel like a Tim Burton movie for a bit. Cause it's like, oh, this is like so beautiful to look at. It's like, oh, cause it's Lubezki who's doing the cinematography in this movie. So there's definitely some elements to this that I really, really enjoyed.
I'm not beautiful enough for you.
Just quickly, I watched this YouTube video about a photographer named, I'm just looking it up right now, Ishiyuchi Miyako. Anyways, I've never heard of her before, but just the quick anecdote. If you can find it, watch it. Ishiuchimiyako. I can't remember what the channel is. Fantastic interview. But one of her last projects, she's in her 70s. She was asked to go to Hiroshima, depending on, I don't know the correct name. And she says she didn't want to go because it has been documented so frequently. But finally, she convinced herself to go for one day. And the thing that struck out most for her was that everything you watch, everything you see from photography of that era came in black and white. And so she had this expectation that this is a zone of death and destruction and mayhem, and everything would essentially appear to her in black and white. But she created a photo series because when she got there, she realized like all the victims' clothing, all of the remaining pieces and fragments were not just, in life and in color, but they were super beautiful, ornate, and colorful. And so her photo series is actually of like torn dresses and, like remains of that era, but they're like in this beautiful, blues and reds and greens. It's interesting how we associate color and black and white with different concepts of life. In this case, red is blood, death, and murder. But we also presume that a black and white desaturate is a very old, archaic.
Yeah, and I think I play around with it. I also think it depends on your age a little bit. I recall reading essays by Roger Ebert, and what he mentioned about black and white is that, yes, it's an older style of filmmaking, but there's two things that happen when something is shot in black and white. Weirdly, it feels more real because that's what all the old documentary footage, like from the war and stuff, was brought back in, was black and white. And so internally, you use like black and white as being like, this is a documentary of what is being shown here right now. But also, that generation who grew up with black and white films also, this is wild, dreamt in black and white. They've done studies on this. So like at least I, dream in color, but my parents and people older than them actually dream in black and white because of those images that are being shown to them. So both is like realistic and dreamlike at the same time. It's this weird juxtaposition that happens when something is filmed in black and white.
I feel like I'm in a nightmare right now.
I was just going to side comment that I thought I had read that everyone dreams in black and white, but maybe
just dogs.
To your point, and then that thing about dreaming language, but there's no language in it. But I have no idea how anyone corroborates that, because even when I have my most fearful or vivid dreams, I can't actually explain them very well in the morning. I get fragments because they're probably fragments. Apparently, you probably know this, men are more likely to be colorblind by a genetic trait, and women generally are not. And so Disney, for example, apparently used only female colorists when making the original animated films because women could understand the color better. So I think that's fascinating, and it may harken in a patriarchal sense why, we may lean to black and white because you get contrast, but you don't have to interpret color data. Whereas, right. If you ever watch a color wheel or an explanation of tones.
It's why in Psycho, the blood that circles the drain is chocolate syrup because he wanted it to stand out more, right? Well, but we interpret it as like, oh, that's blood that's going down the drain.
I was going to ask, is that the correct viscosity of blood? I mean, you seem to know a lot about blood.
Depends on what the temperature is outside, but I mean, it's pretty close.
I've murdered someone in the snow, and it was quite different. No, the other thing that was interesting just to this point is, have you watched Mad Max, whatever, Fury Road, the Chrome edition?
Not the Chrome edition, no. I've only seen the color version.
I watched it in black and white, and it was fucking incredible. And I think it was a completely different experience than what I remember. I mean, narratively, of course, the same movie, but there's something interesting there that we will need someone smarter than us to open up.
To delve into. Yeah. By the way, just so we don't get like super far away from it, I had to look it up. The third movie that Lubezki won an Oscar for was Gravity. So Gravity, Birdman, The Revenant, all in 3 successive years.
I was, seriously, waiting with bated breath.
I haven't watched Gravity, believe it or not, but Revenant and Birdman are incredible.
I am the weirdo who loves Gravity, but I can't imagine that holds up watching on a small screen the very first time. You kind of need to see that on a huge screen.
It's on my list on Netflix, but we'll see.
I can't wait for Gravity 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Anyway, so let's do some background here, and then we'll get into some spoilers for Sleepy Hollow. Sleepy Hollow was released on November 19th, 1999. The other major release that came out is a movie that we've already talked about. It's The World Is Not Enough, directed by Michael Apted, written by Neil Purvis and Robert Wade and Bruce Fierstein, starring Pierce Brosnan, Sophie Marceau, and Robert Carlyle. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that film, you can go back and listen to our episode on that.
I can give you my thoughts now, if you like.
That's fine.
they weren't good ones.
Double O, oh no. It is currently rated 7.3 on IMDb, 65 on Metacritic, and then over on Rotten Tomatoes, per 121 critics, it is at 69%, and 607,041 users give it an 80%. So there is a bit of a divide between general movie-going public and the critics here, although both of them have it rated as fresh. You can buy this on DVD or Blu-ray. You can also buy or rent it on iTunes, and you can also rent it on Google Play or YouTube. Its budget was $100 million.
What?
Yeah, it was $100 million, this movie, which kind of blows my mind. It's probably all the period costumes and stuff that they had to go film in, is what
but
I'm
you think
guessing.
they'd have leftover stuff from making other period movies?
No, brand new every single time. It opened to $30 million, would domestically go on to make 101. Internationally, it would pick up an additional $105 million, bringing its total box office take to 206. So I would say that a pretty modest success. That is $321 million with inflation. Its plot description from IMDb is: Ichabod Crane is sent to Sleepy Hollow to investigate the decapitations of 3 people, with the culprit being the legendary apparition, the Headless Horseman.
Ooh.
I am so turned on right now.
It stars, of course, Johnny Depp as Ichabod Crane, Christina Ricci as Katrina Van Tassel, Christopher Walken as Hessian Horseman, or Hessian Horseman, who knows, Miranda Richardson as Lady Van Tassel. Anything you want to say about those actors?
Just quickly, you know what I realized is which character actor, I can't remember his name now, was in Ravenous, and they should have just brought the costumes from Ravenous. Yeah. I mean, could have saved probably $50 million there. You know, presuming I actually did the research for this on time, because that's what we want. The one thing that I did find, which I think is interesting, is, of course, I spent all my time on Johnny Depp. Without getting too much into gossip, Amber Heard, I think the fascinating part is I always had this knowledge that he was like a musician that came to LA and didn't necessarily want to be an actor. But I had learned that apparently got into acting because he became friends with your favorite actor, Nick Cage.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
So
why have they done a movie together?
I don't know. Actually, I didn't look that up. But apparently, Johnny Depp became involved with the bassist's sister, and they got married, and she turned out to be friends with Nick Cage. And when they started hanging out, Nick Cage was like, "Hey, you should act, man." And then he auditioned, and he started getting roles. I mean, he's a beautiful man. So he hit it pretty big right off the bat.
There is a theory out there that every like super famous actor actually wanted to be a musician, and every super famous musician actually wanted to be an actor.
There's definitely has to be a lot of crossover, because the fundamental thing is they want to be seen, Kyle. They need to be
that's
seen.
right. I find Johnny Depp's career to be pretty fascinating, because now it's so hard. Like, if you only know Johnny Depp from basically Pirates and then to present day, there was a time where Johnny Depp legitimately was considered box office poison. Like, he was like this artsy guy who was in like auteur films and would like do these like great performances, and none of them would make money. And then a couple times he was tried to bring in to like helm like a big movie, and they all flopped. This kind of being the exception to the rule. So it's just like Tim Burton loved him, and like other people that worked with him loved him. So they kind of just kept casting him, even though if it was probably up to producers, they would have been like, let's not, because this guy cannot open a movie. And so there's those things like Benny and June, and of course like Edward Scissorhands, and What's Eating Gilbert Grape, like all these other films. Like that's how I know Johnny Depp originally.
Because we're old.
Pirates was the outlier to me. I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, he's doing this thing, and it's a huge Disney movie. And then that's kind of, and unfortunately, my opinion, so asterisk, Phil has kind of ruined him until present day, because that's kind of all he does anymore is basically variations on Jack Sparrow.
Although, you know, I had this thought in my head that this movie and a few of his others, I mean, he has done quite a variety of roles. I feel like these are all precursors. Like, this could be the origin of Jack Sparrow. There's something about this performance that actually connects to what he builds into, his now daily persona. The only other counterpoint to that is I watched him on YouTube in some interview show. I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel or whatever. And he's like Keanu. He just comes in. He's like a nice, shy guy. And he isn't Jack Sparrow when he's like just talking to people. And it's quite jarring.
Just wants to be by himself and, cover himself in neckerchiefs. I, of course, know Christina Ricci for being in things like Casper and Addams Family. Like, that's basically my 2 points of reference for Christina Ricci.
Well, she still looks the same as she did when she was 13. So
I also think that crediting Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman is like, yeah, absolutely, he is. But I do not think that's actually him when he's in like the headless form of the Headless Horseman.
It's hard to tell. It's Christopher Walken. I mean, he can
I know.
dance on walls, literally. So
I kind of wanted him to break out with his stupid sharp teeth and like to start doing like a dance break. I think it would have been great.
Start writing your fanfic.
I don't think he even says anything in this movie. I'm pretty sure he has
groaning.
no line of dialogue.
No, yeah, a lot of weird groaning. I mean, his face was enough. Yeah, I can't unsee it.
Weirdly enough, Christopher Walken, I first knew about because of his hosting gigs on Saturday Night Live. Like, that's kind of my first point of reference. And then only knew that he was doing movies like afterwards. that's what he did. I thought he was just a weird guy who came and did the Continental on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the first movie I watched him in. I don't remember. Like, I watched Deer Hunter probably 15 years ago. I had no idea how good that movie, or weird, or, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it holds up. It's a very weird movie, actually.
It's also another over 3 hour long movie.
Anyways, it was great. There's a lot of moments in this. This cast is like a who's who of character actors. It's great. You just, I mean, Palpatine's in this movie. It's the strangest thing. Yeah.
Well, almost every British actor that was in the Harry Potter series is also in this movie. So it's like a weird,
of course, that's where you go, Harry Potter
thing that you could go side by side. It's like, oh, that's Dumbledore, and like that's Mr. Dursley, and then that's that guy. So
no, I didn't get that at all.
I wanted to delve more into like the history of this movie at some point, because there must be some story on how this was written, because the credited team is that the story is by Kevin Yeager and Andrew Kevin Walker, written by Andrew Kevin Walker, based on the short story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Why I say that that's weird is that Kevin Yeager, who has that story by credit, it has this and a Tales from the Crypt episode. His only writing credits. But he has a much more deeper resume in makeup and special effects. That is what he does. So he worked on a bunch of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, and I will give a huge shout out to Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which has probably some of the best special effects and makeup stuff, at least in horror films.
Quickly, did you know that was Johnny Depp's first role, Nightmare on Elm Street?
Well, on the first, Nightmare on Elm Street number 1.
I didn't know that because I don't watch those movies. But
I wonder if he brought him over somehow. Oh, this gets curiouser and curiouser. But he was also the makeup artist on every Bill and Ted movie, including the latest one. So he still works. But I would say that his probably biggest claim to fame in the makeup department comes from Face Off. Because how do you make
Nicolas Cage?
Cage.
This is crazy.
Look, I know. How do you get Nick Cage to also look like John Travolta and John Travolta to look like Nick Cage? Like, that is some amazing makeup that he did.
It's almost like you have to take his face off.
I know.
Right?
I know. This is all Nick Cage all the way down here, apparently. This also, actually, this is even going to get weirder with Nick Cage here, I just realized, because Andrew Kevin Walker had already written Seven, the movie Seven, but we've also seen his work already because he wrote the movie 8mm.
Huh.
And he'd write a few other films. The last one, or one of the last ones, being The Wolfman from 2010, the Benicio del Toro remake.
It's fascinating to think that Nick Cage might be the Illuminati. We keep thinking of Tom Cruise and Scientology.
Yeah, it's actually Nick Cage who's pulling all the strings here.
It's possible. It's possible. I'm not going to rule it out.
I don't trust those Coppolas.
He's probably in your machine. We'll have
maybe
to dig in there. Yeah, he might be in there.
Please stop besmirching our Lord and Savior Nick Cage.
Can you imagine that? It's opened up and it's full of bees.
Oh, God.
This, of course, was directed by Tim Burton. We've already talked about him a little bit, but like his first full-length feature was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but he'd also done by this point Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, and Ed Wood had come out a couple years beforehand. I am also one of the very few people who loves Mars Attacks, but I'm waiting to stake my flag in that opinion. Like you said, like this was kind of his downfall. I agree, because I feel like he came almost a parody of himself after this.
Big
because
Fish.
He did The Planet.
That was the one I remember.
Big Fish is probably the lone like great movie that people will refer to, because people love that movie.
All right, keep going. Sorry.
But there's Planet of the Apes remake, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Alice in Wonderland, Dark Shadows, Big Eyes, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and the live-action Dumbo that came out last year.
Awful.
Yeah, so those are not a great string of films to put under your name. And of course, up next is Beetlejuice 2.
No.
Oh, yeah.
That's a thing?
That is a thing that has been announced.
Are they bringing the original cast?
They're bringing Keaton back.
Can ghosts age? I guess you just don't need the makeup. No, that's cruel.
There's no way that's going to be good. Like, let's just be
I will put this out
that.
there. I know at least one person who will pay $20 to rent it. Kyle Marshall.
I'll still watch it. I watched Bloodline. Okay,
Yeah.
I spent $20 on
You paid
Bloodline.
Is it Bloodline or Bloodshot?
No, sorry, Bloodshot.
Yeah.
I paid $20 for
You paid
Bloodshot.
$20
Of course,
for
I'm going
Bill
to
and
pay $20.
Ted's, reunion.
I sure did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, just quickly, this doesn't have to be on. Did you actually pay money for King of Staten Island?
I eventually did,
Oh,
yes.
God.
But I waited until I could rent it for $7
And
rather than pay $20.
Was it worth it? It looks terrible.
It wasn't really even worth the $7, to be honest with
You're
you.
welcome, Kyle. You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, keep
thanks.
going. A digression.
That's everything. I mean, I don't know if we have to say much more than that. I think, again, Tim Burton is known for the aesthetic that he provides. And I think that even when he was making what I consider good films, there were still those detractors who thought he was more style over substance, which I don't know. Maybe that's true, but I just like the style so much that I didn't really much care.
He's like cartoon goth. He looks the part too. I mean, I don't know what he looks like now.
He basically single-handedly made Hot Topic a thing.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Let's rip open the wound.
Yeah,
I don't know how to frame
let's
that.
Slice it.
I guess
slice it apart. Let's
start with this. What elements worked for you?
Johnny Depp's great in it, in the sense that, I loved how he depicts being cowardly and bold. It's a fascinating tension between the two, because he is pushing back against the system at the beginning, but he's petrified
but it's like also
of everything.
like super afraid of fighters and like blood and It also it was very reminiscent. There is this one sketch that continually cracks me up with Stephen Colbert and Steve Carell, the waiters who are going to throw up at everything that they talk about.
I have seen that, yeah.
I love my theory, and this actually is true if you ever watched the movie Game Night as well, which I'm also a big fan of, is that almost throwing up is funnier than throwing up.
Yeah, of course. Throwing up is disgusting. It's hard to watch.
But almost like like almost like throwing up is so funny to me.
I'm almost throwing up right now.
It's funny. It's like yawning. There's an element where you will dry heave when you see a dry heave, but there's also an element where you'll laugh depending on how it's depicted. The other thing that I liked, I think we alluded to it, is it kept me engaged because I thought it was going to be, a conspiracy murder mystery. They do a lot of that intentional misdirection, like when he arrives in the town and all the elders are like looking at each other in a cartoonish side-eyed way and almost like, it's almost Saturday Night Live. And then by the end, I was like, holy fuck, like there are ghosts, there are witches, people are dying. This is getting into like proper horror movie, cartoonish and comedic. But yeah, it was quite jarring.
I think the Sam Raimi comparison is actually really good because much like his most famous stuff, there is absolutely horrific things that are meant to be horrific, and then a joke a couple scenes later to
just
kind of like keep you engaged.
Yeah.
They pulled me back and be like, okay, this is okay. And then it's like, okay, now we can scare you again.
Yeah. And speaking of Kubrick, I mean, all these little nuances, like having the twins in the forest and like, even using the reds. And so there are these tones where you associate automatically with cinematic horror movies, not like slasher flicks or something, but the gore is quite not off. I mean, it is off-putting at the beginning. The first time they're decapitated and it's actually like right in your face. I was just like, oh, this is, I didn't even remember. I thought this was a kid's movie, and it is not. You should not let your kids watch this movie.
Should not. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like this, but it was weird how he tries so hard to juxtapose Ichabod Crane's memories of his witch mother and his sort of tension of becoming a scientist. In the end, it works, but like all attempts to do this, it is quite hard to contextualize at the beginning. So that almost made me not quit the movie, but turned me off.
I don't even know how necessary those flashbacks really are. That could not be coming up more naturally, either through dialogue or through action or something like that. Because I really just don't think that they are additive all that much. This kind of goes into like my major criticism, because just like you, as far as the positives go, I think, yes, Johnny Depp in the central role really does carry this movie. Because, and I hate to say it, I don't think Christina Ricci was cast well in this movie.
No.
I don't think she actually does a good job, and I know she can. So that means to me that she was either miscast or Tim Burton asked her to do a weird performance that doesn't really fit.
It's a weird character. It's hard.
It's a weird, and I think it's underwritten is basically the main problem with it. But so we have this cool central character. They are adding a lot to the original story, like just giving him backstory, but also like now he's like a constable and he's like investigating a murder and like all this other like overt paranormal stuff that they added in. What I was hoping is what it looked like it was going to do is like, okay, we have this paranormal story that's going to form the backbone, but the middle portion is going to be basically like your Agatha Christie parlor room whodunit, and we're going to find out. Unfortunately for me, I think the middle portion is like the worst part of the movie. It drags, and it does a lot of telling instead of showing. There's two scenes in particular. One where they go to the blood tree, and I thought that was like sufficiently creepy. I actually really liked them meeting with like the old witch character, and then they go to the grave, and he's like, "Oh, well, someone's stolen his head," which obviously means that we have to return his head back to his grave because that will reverse the curse. I'm like, wait, whoa. Like, how do you know all of this stuff just off the cuff? So they do that to like basically like fast forward through plot elements. But then you get like a couple scenes later and he's like, let me scatter plot on my journal. It's like last name, all right. It's like murderer ? Oh man, what could be? And like it's like the most boring way that you could show this type of stuff. And then they go and then he just automatically confesses. Like, no, like I want that like Columbo or like an actual like Poirot type of thing where he gets everyone together and then starts explaining how things are happening and then the murder confesses. I thought that would have been a cool thing to reveal in the midpoint and then finish off with the Headless Horseman being like your ultimate bad guy. It was a slog for me to get through that middle portion.
I think to your point, they had to probably make a decision whether they wanted all of the people to die.
The answer is always yes.
Or for them, the elders, to be separate from the killings. And they decided that the elders all had to be involved in this plot for the general story to make sense, but then you actually have a zombie ghost monster, so they can't be around for that last sit around. Because I thought too at the beginning, because they set it up as a sit around when they go into the chamber and everybody's side-eyeing each other, and so I thought this is where it's going to go, and it's going to turn out that somebody's wearing a mask and they're faking the deaths, and in the end it'll turn out to be Murder on the Orient Express. But it turns out that there's actually a ghost. So that was weird. You know what is also a missed opportunity is they set up this great thing where he's inventing his own scientific tools and they completely drop it. And it would have been cool to have made that part of his, his ability to beat the ghost and the witch. If somehow, like even in the fight scene in the mill, if he had some kind of contraption in each of the moments to propel him through the fear. But about halfway through the movie, you never see another weird.
This is not important anymore.
Yeah. So I think those are misses. It is still a compelling movie. I watched it all the way through the end. I wasn't upset that I saw it. It might have been the stylized thing, and
that's the frustrating part of this is that I enjoyed the movie overall because I think it's the charisma maybe of Johnny Depp to a certain degree. I actually do think that the setup is great. Like I loved how we start off like we see this decapitation just so that we set the scene of like, hey, this is the kind of movie you're in for. Like, that you're going to see some gore. And then right after that, you get like that kind of funny scene with Johnny Depp being like, maybe we shouldn't just like burn people.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so there's also going to be comedy and then sent off onto his journey. I love the credit sequence, honestly, of him just walking through like moody woods and stuff like that. I also love to see Christopher Lee, which by the way, shout out back to the 1950s Hammer horror series because he was Dracula in all of those movies.
And that's a sort of reference that probably we can insinuate Tim Burton might have been aware of.
Oh, he would 100% have known that, yes. It's also why like so many people wanted to use Christopher Lee later on in his life, just because he was such a big part of those people. Because Peter Jackson was big into horror films, like so he would have known Christopher Lee from that. Sam Raimi, of course, like Tim Burton. So like the setup is good. I actually even like the climax of this movie. I actually had a lot of fun with them fighting and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. No comment on that. And it's just so much that this gets bogged down in all this other extraneous stuff. I even like some of the symbology or that they were bringing up, like the caged bird metaphor, the cardinal. I actually liked the kind of head fake that it's the mother and not the daughter that's actually causing everything, because it makes it look like it's the Christina Ricci character who's going to be the ultimate person who's pulling the strings, but it's not. So I think all of those things worked for me. That whole church scene I actually thought was actually really well done too.
Yes.
Of the spear through the heart and pulling him out, but
it's crazy.
Him figuring out, oh, he can't come through the church. Okay, so let's calm down, let's figure this out, and like all bedlam breaks loose. So all that stuff is so well done, and I think Tim Burton is doing a fine job. It's like, just wish they could clean up the mess that is the investigation portion.
I think this is the split at the beginning you mentioned between critics and users. You know, if you just sit down and watch this, then at the end you're like, oh, you know, that had a lot of great things that happen. But if you're jerks like us and you start analyzing it, you're like, oh, well, why did they do this? And this part kind of, yeah. So it's interesting.
That's like I could foresee myself just watching this in the future, just because, like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's a fine sit to watch this movie. Just have it
else to do
wash over you.
Yeah.
I have nothing over. It's not super long. It's not like, let's go watch, I don't know, Lawrence of Arabia. That's 4 hours. Like, it's not going to be that type of experience. What do you think? Did you see this in 1999 or was it later than that?
Definitely not. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I watched it in theaters. It's possible I did. I know that I would have watched it a lot. I suspect I may have even owned it because I've seen this movie more than once. I was a big Tim Burton and Johnny Depp fan. I loved Ed Wood. I loved, you know, of course, Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands are part of the formative experience of being a child in the 90s and 80s. So, you know, I definitely would have watched it. I don't remember if I watched it in a theater per se. Yeah. And I remember that it was popular, but people who would watch Tim Burton movies really liked this movie. And I don't remember hearing a lot of negative or critical things.
Yeah, it's interesting that I have never seen this movie in the intervening years. Like, I always thought that somehow it would have, like, been at a watch party or one of the Halloween parties or something that I've gone to in the past, but somehow it just has never popped
it's
up.
Not quite camp enough for like a party.
Maybe that might be actually true. It actually can't be enough. The way that Edward Scissorhands actually absolutely is, right. In the best possible ways. Like, it is, I think, trying to be more scary than it is trying to be lovable. I actually do think, though, had I seen this in 1999, that I would have loved it. Oh, yeah. And that I think that nostalgia would have carried through to present day. And I would have been much more like, yeah, like, these things don't work, but still, it's really fun. Now, looking at this as an adult for the first time, I'm more like, oh, there's a lot of things that don't work, but I still kind of like it. Like, it's just coming at it from a different angle.
I'm just trying to imagine, like, if I had watched, you know, like the series, like we talked about, of all the weird Johnny Depp movies, which I would have. I mean, we brought up when we were watching the Jim Ghost Dog, and Dead Man came up, which I had watched, which is weird because how would I watch that? That was definitely not in theaters. If it was like one night. That was not a commercial success. So I've watched the series of Johnny Depp movies. I've watched all the Tim Burton movies.
You need to get out more.
And I'm just trying to think, like, I would have probably automatically rubber stamped this thing as a 4 or 5 star movie at the time. It's hard to keep a critical eye in fandom. You know, it's almost like talking to somebody about the MCU and they've watched all of them and love them.
Whatever could you mean, Dave?
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, looking back at it now that we're wiser and we have such a breadth of experience.
Now that we're like professional movie critics, we kind of have to look at this from ultimate angles.
We are professionals.
Do we?
Well, you know, we're rolling. I don't know about you, but I like rolling in my bed of cash every night. Speaking of climax. No, I'm just trying to think what else there is about this movie. It's weird when we do these genre-specific films. There's not a lot of wider conceptual discussion, is there? It's like people die.
No, I don't think this is striving for any like huge point. I just think, again, it's fun. I think this is going to sound way more negative than I mean it to be. But when we think of genre, so like science fiction, horror, fantasy, I don't think that they cannot have deeper, resonant meanings. There have been absolute examples of that happening. But I think that more so, the fans of that genre, myself included, want a really well-told story. They want like those stakes to be put into there. We want to have like those setups and payoffs. And I think that's what you're kind of pointing out. It's like, oh, we're giving all these setups, like with his gadgetry, with his being scared of things. They don't really get paid off. No. And I think that's why this movie feels a little bit lesser than. It's like, oh, I just want a little bit more because there hasn't been like this finale or this resolution to these things that you put up here. And so it's like, I love the setup, and then it kind of just flatlines until the end.
I think that's the thing in the end, like bring up the science. You know, they do try really hard to counterpoint rationality and spiritualism, or in this case, I don't know, Wicca, witchcraft. By the end, as we're swelling into this, spiritual realm where there's actually a ghost and the horror elements become very vivid. It is, you're left a little bit stranded because I like the idea personally of, faith is a weird word just because of the Christian rhetoric, but this idea that the unknown is not only plausible, but an important part of the human experience. So like movies are a great example, like with the exception, this is why most people don't pay for documentaries. When you need an element of the unknown where you can take something on faith and then kind of disconnect, particularly these days from fucking Twitter or whatever it is that's telling you the reality of the world burning. In this movie, and maybe there's a Tim Burton thing, it just goes so far off the deep end by the end that I lost my grounding and I felt a little bit, this is why you get the sense of wasted opportunities. If you're going to go that way, don't put in the science stuff. I mean, he could just be, right? Well,
I also think too that there's this weird subtext through this that it's the turn of the century, right? It takes place in 1799 rather than 1999.
That was a good party year.
And whether that they're trying to show off like, hey, all this bad stuff has happened in the late 90s, but it's a new century and it's going to be a new us and it's going to be a new you sort of thing. I don't know if that really feels earned by the end of it, to be honest. I feel like it's just like they kind of rushed this into production almost to be like, let's capitalize on it being 1999 and the turn of the century.
I think that's exactly why I really dislike the last scene. I think like walking into London or wherever, and everybody like, we just killed the ghost, but let's go get a condo. We'll get a flat with this adopted kid, and I'm going to marry this witch.
Let's become consumers.
Yeah, this witch looks like she's 13, but I'm going to marry her, and we're great. Everything's, it was such a weird. You got to have some downtime. Maybe you've just killed a witch and a ghost, and they went into the hell tree. Like, you don't just move into an urban area, right? Like, your wife's a witch. I mean, you got to stay in the cottage a little bit and just mourn, right?
Decompress
a little bit grieving. She did get upset when her dad died and it was over. She was like, yeah, fuck off. Let's move on. But that might be an interesting retrospective assessment of the mindset of Americans in the late 90s, where it's like, yeah, Y2K's coming, the thing's going to be shit, but we're going to be fine. We're going to walk off into a sunset and, everything's going to be good.
We'll walk it off. It'll be fine.
Walk it off.
We're done here.
All right, so the machine has asked us to wrap it up. We ask this question every so often, Dave. Do you think that this movie is still culturally relevant in any foreseeable way?
Culturally, no. I think that, kind of we brought up, there's a reason why it's not viewed today. And I think it missed the camp mark and it missed the horror mark. So it got stuck somewhere in the middle. So I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine somebody getting excited.
It's like halfway between that hell dimension and reality. It's like in the tree with its arms sticking out.
Yeah, there's like a movie purgatory it gets stuck in. Yeah, so I'm trying to imagine, like, does a 19-year-old nudge the next guy and be like, oh, I got a copy of Sleepy Hollow. We have to win. I don't know. And Tim Burton's kind of destroyed his own legacy with just a lot of really kind of middling movies. So nobody's excited about, the name anymore, I don't think. And Johnny Depp's Jack Sparrow. I mean, if you want to pitch this as a Jack Sparrow origin story, I think a lot more people would watch it, but they would be disappointed because as funny as that idea is to me, they have nothing to do with each other. So, yeah, I don't think it's culturally relevant anymore. I think that most people would be fine never having even heard of this movie. Is that cruel? I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think even in the pantheon of Tim Burton movies, you're still always going to have like that Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, maybe Ed Wood, although I don't know how
That's for us
much
nerds.
that movie gets watched. That's for us nerds. But it's like definitely those two big hits are like what propels him still to be talked about. Batman, the original Batman. But yeah, I don't see this movie like in 20 more years if we reconvened here in, whether that be 2039.
We'll be here.
Robot Jesus save us all.
Unless the machine kills us. Yeah.
In 2039, are people going to be talking about Sleepy Hollow at all? No, I don't think so. We're still going to be doing this podcast on your 16th Why don't we get into ratings? You can find our entire list of movies that we've talked about this season over on our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. You can find the whole thing. KDVSTM is also our social media handle for both Instagram and Twitter. You can see all the stuff that gets posted over there. So out of 5, Dave, how would you rate this film?
I think I'm going to go with a 2.5. I'm only going to add the 2.5 because I didn't leave upset. But there are a lot of things that, like we talked about, I don't think people need to watch this movie anymore. So, but I'll be nice just because Johnny Depp's great to look at and he was good in it. I'll give it a 2.5 overall.
I am going to be slightly more positive than you. I'm giving this a 3. Some of those elements that I said that I enjoyed, I really do enjoy. So will I end up watching this movie again? Probably. But it's definitely not going to be on like, I have to watch this movie again on those lists. This gives us a very hard job to do here now, Dave, because that has tied with 6 other films.
Perfect. Home stretch, baby.
The average is out to 2.75. Of course, we will be rounding down to 2.5 because we don't round up here. But so I'll go from the top to the bottom. Tarzan, Notting Hill, South Park, Mystery Men, She's All That, Ravenous. So those are from top to bottom how we have them rated. Would you put it above all of those, at the end, somewhere in the middle?
My instinct was put at the end. I might put it above Ravenous, but I don't think I would go higher personally. Unlike you, I'm not sure if I'd watch this again.
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to push back maybe a little bit with this, and this is going to go against some of my ratings for those movies, but I'm just looking at those as a collection of films. And so if I go from the bottom, like I do like Ravenous actually quite a bit more, but I would probably say that it's definitely better than She's All That. I personally think this is better than Mystery Man. I guess it just depends on, do you want to put it above South Park, which I know you would. So I think personally that it should go kind of in the middle here between above South Park, but underneath Notting Hill.
You know, I'd be willing to put it underneath South Park just to appease your ego for that piece of crap.
Well, then let's do that then. Let's put it underneath South Park, but above Mystery Men. So that means... So entering our list at the number 26 position is Sleepy Hollow.
We've watched a lot of movies, Kyle.
Well, 40 of them now, yeah. And only a few more weeks of this year to go. And then who knows what will happen come season 2.
If there is one. Apocalypse is
if there is one. Who knows? I don't want to promise something that we can't keep.
Your life is a series of broken promises.
So let's see what we're going to be reviewing here next week. I'm just going to push this button. Oh, okay. We're sticking with the horror theme here. I guess we are in October here. You might want to get a air sickness bag, Dave, because we are going to be watching The Blair Witch Project next week.
Gross.
What do you think about The Blair Witch Project?
Speaking of dry heaving, I've never watched it.
What? No way.
Yep, had no interest in it then, have no interest in it now. And as you know, it seems to be what inspired Paul Greengrass to shake his camera. So I'm not looking forward to this.
I don't know if this has happened before yet. Has there been a movie that I've seen that you haven't seen? I think this might be a first for our show. No, I hadn't seen Notting Hill before.
Apparently I've watched a lot of movies in my life, Kyle.
Apparently. All absolute shit, but you have seen a lot of movies.
Oh, South Park.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're right. Yeah. Sorry. We can't give the crown to Blair Witch Project. South Park was a movie I had seen.
8mm?
Okay, Dave, can you help me put this head back on? Just
Ow. Okay. Ow. Why did you sharpen its teeth?
I mean, it needs to eat. Okay, counterclockwise. Turn it counterclockwise.
That's lefty loosey? Wait,
666 times, Dave. 666 times.
That's not a good number.
I never know what you're talking about.